Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Nicole Vignola Show. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Julie Fratantoni. Today we're going to be talking about the use of social media, the internet and ChatGPT on our brains, our health and what that means for us for the future. Dr. Julie has been doing a lot of research on this recently and she wrote an amazing article on her Substack about it. So this is why I thought I would interview her and we could join forces on some of the ideas that I have as well and some of the reading that I have done personally. So guys, as always, we are going to the stratosphere and beyond, so please like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, just can't wait to tune in. Hello, you are my first guest. This is amazing. Like you're in my house, you're in Portugal.
I'm so honored. It's so fun to be here.
Yeah. Do you want to give everyone a little bit of background about how we met?
Yeah, we met on Instagram, didn't we?
Yeah, 100%.
And
The internet.
we met on the internet. And yeah, just being women in neuroscience and sharing science, being science communicators,
Yeah.
it was kind of a natural friendship from the start. We also both had, at the time, had a German Shepherd mixed dog. And I feel like that was like an initial bonding point for us too.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is sweet.
Which is a perfect segue into the fact that I want to start out by saying that yes, obviously social media has its bad perks, but there's also positive aspects to it. And I really want to talk about that today because I think that when we change the narrative and the behavior and the response and the attitude and the mindset all around social media, we start to gain a little bit more control over it because there are some positive aspects to social media and the internet. Like we got to meet, I got to reconnect with my boyfriend we met 3 years ago in a coffee shop in real life, but because of the internet, we managed to stay, I suppose, in some level of contact, and so I've met so many amazing people and opportunities from the internet. And I do think that social media can be fun. It can be educational. I learn things all the time, but my social media is created in a way that's either funny or educational.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoy the comedy aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can get into some of the benefits of how social media humor and banter, I don't know if you've done any reading on that, can actually have positive effects on our brains. But again, it all depends on, our relationship to social media and how we behave around it. So one of the things I want to ask you is that I saw this paper recently, and albeit I haven't read the entire thing yet, I saw that basically in the summary, it was showing that young individuals, it's not about the time that they spend on social media per se. And obviously I'm going to say that statement with an asterisk. But it was more about the compulsion and the addictive behavior between not being able to come off it when needed. And that's where the disparity lied and where the mental health problems came in, rather than the amount of time that they spent on there. Now, that's just one study because we also know that time on social media can also impact mental health, predominantly if it's going into late night. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I'll say this all the time. It's not just what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. We can't just put social media in a bucket and say it's all bad, right? Or all good.
Yeah.
It's good to have this healthy understanding. And I think it's important that we are learning so much more about the nuance of it, right? There is not really a black and white at this point. There are some really good guidelines, but I think when it comes to the consumption of it, it's all about your relationship with it as well. So kind of there's training around, not only what you're doing, but then the ability to, I guess, attach and detach from it is a really interesting thing. So I haven't seen that study, but I would love to look at it.
Yeah.
But, it also speaks to just the content of what you're actually doing. And so is the content you're consuming making you anxious and feeling comparison and, driving all of these negative self-image or body dysmorphia, there's all these things, or are you laughing and sharing those things with your friends? And one tip that I like to give is, it's really important to have things in real life that are just as exciting and motivating. And so when the most exciting thing is online, then of course you're going to want to stay there because that's what's most rewarding. So making sure that you have other activities, things you enjoy, hobbies, things that you're curious and passionate about that you can explore in person in the real world, so that, when you're getting off of it, it's not to nothing, but it's actually to something maybe better or equally as motivating and enjoyable.
Okay, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. I feel like phones and video games are technically more fun, and I think understanding that as well can also be helpful. Because yes, whilst it's also it's a trained behavior to then say, okay, now I'm going to move to my book, which in the moment might feel like it's boring compared to social media, but it's also understanding. And I think that mindset aspect is so important because there's so much research around mindset theories and how our beliefs around particular things can also impact our physiology. And whilst, I know we're talking about reward pathways here, but as an example, Dr. Leah Crum does loads of research on how our mindset towards things, especially like food and stress, can alter our physiology. So, when we say you just have to adopt a different mindset, it's not just kind of like a woo-woo things. It's actually physiologically been proven that it will change the way that your body responds to particular stimuli. We can get into the depths of that, but I think there's just so much we need to talk about. So just I've spoken about this loads. Mindset theories, there's loads in my book about it as well, if anyone wants to dig in a little bit deeper. But that's why I think that just even that understanding piece can be so helpful in people going, okay, well, I know that video games are more fun. I know that social media is more exciting, but I've had my time now. Let me move on, right?
Yeah. I think that's important to acknowledge.
Yeah.
This is maybe a lot more stimulating or
Yeah.
a lot of a quicker reward feeling. But I think also, the more I think your relationship and your mindset around the other things, look, whether it's exercise or going to a yoga class or playing tennis with a friend, right? Those are all, I guess, more physical examples, but it's like those are stimulating and fun and rewarding in a different way. And the more you do those, the more you're excited to go do them. It takes some momentum. In the beginning, it's more effortful. And then the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
100%. And also we basically, the salience network, for anyone that's listening, is responsible for attaching salience, meaning importance, to different parts of the brain. And if you continuously give into that short-term gratification, your body starts to prioritize it, your brain starts to prioritize it, because it starts to take that shortcut as a mental heuristic, which is a shortcut that your brain does to arrive at a particular conclusion. So why would you want to put an effort for the reward if you can just get the reward straight away? We know that long-term reward is much more effective than short-term, but the more we give into those short-term rewards, and especially that urge of picking up your phone or the urge of doing something without thinking about it, the more that behavior becomes automatic. And so a lot of the time, for me, it's also like implementing that choice piece where you're saying, okay, you get that urge to grab your phone. I normally tell my clients to give it a 5-minute rule. Okay, put on a 5-minute timer. After 5 minutes, do you still want to grab it? Yes, that's fine, but you're intentionally doing that rather than just automatically reaching for the phone without even realizing it. Because I don't know if you've ever left your phone at home, but how many times do you reach into your handbag to want to check it as an automatic pattern that actually is a little bit flabbergasting when I've done it, because I've counted and I actually want to reach for my phone 23 times. And I knew I didn't have it. That goes to show how these patterns become so deeply ingrained and wired in a way that, we call it automaticity. So it's just about reinstilling that kind of conscious part where you're saying, okay, I'm consciously choosing to go on social media, not just becoming.
And I think that's the thing, is most of the time we're not consciously choosing. And it really is an impulse and a trained behavior, but also sometimes a stress response and a way to dissociate or distract from uncomfortable feelings or stress, or, it's like, oh, rather than feel this uncomfortable feeling, I'll just like numb out or be distracted. And
which I can resonate with.
And I think we all can. I think that to catch yourself in that moment takes a lot of self-awareness that you can build over time, but it's great to acknowledge, like, okay, why am I grabbing my phone, right? Or am I spending hours here because I'm trying to escape something that I don't want to process or deal with?
Okay, so let's say somebody is feeling uncomfortable. Maybe they're going through a breakup, maybe they're going through heartache, maybe they don't have a good mental space right now for whatever reason, and they feel that urge to dissociate, grab their phones and just numb it all out. What could they do instead?
Yeah, this is a great time to, if you can, catch yourself in that moment, recognize what you're doing. And then I would say if you can take a 5-minute walk, like 5 minutes, is very doable. Set that 5-minute timer and take a walk outside, or set a 5-minute timer and journal, just brain dump, whatever it is. Like, here's something I'm trying to avoid or whatever it is. And you don't even have to dive into it. You can just state what it is, whatever you're aware of, and then go on your phone after that, right? But I think you'll find in that 5 minutes of a walk, you might be like, oh, this is kind of nice and want to keep going, or with the journaling. I think those are probably the two best ones in that moment to help with emotion regulation. Breathwork's another one, but I feel like that's another layer of a harder hurdle to get yourself
Yes.
into if you don't already have a regular practice. So I think taking a walk is actually probably one of the best things you could do.
I'm also such a big believer in channeling your emotions into something creative. And so that's one of the tools that I've given in Rewire. But, when I feel stressed now, I used to grab my phone, and I've actually learned to play the guitar. So now I divert into doing something like that. So I'm such a big believer in journaling can be creative, which is amazing.
Yeah.
If it feels a little bit overwhelming to think you've got to write something, maybe like drawing, or just coming back to something that is still keeping your mind busy, but you can still think about the problem without that fear perception involved. Because I think that fear perception is such an important part, because when you're in that state and the amygdala, or the threat detection centers are activated, it can feel like you're catastrophizing and things can get really dark. And I can definitely resonate with that. But when you're doing something that's like, my sister knits a lot, and I can see how it's so good for her mental health, because she's still thinking about her problems, but they don't have that emotional load, that emotional friction that comes with it if you would just sit there and
Yeah, I saw something about this and I haven't looked up the background research to support it. So this is just more
yeah,
take that caveat. But yeah, it was saying like making anything with your hands, even if it's a sandwich,
yeah,
right? But the act of creating brings you into the present moment, whereas anxiety is like kind of spiraling you into the future.
yeah.
But just anything that helps you be in your body is really great. So you don't have to be creative in the sense of like, even if you don't draw or paint or do
Yeah.
art in that sense, but just making anything, make your bed, right? Rearranging your environment and using your body can be really helpful. So.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to add another layer to that, is I think sometimes we put so much emphasis on being a good drawer, being a good painter, and then we don't want to do it because we think we're not good. I'm awful at drawing, and anyone can attest to this, because I posted a photo of my little horse on the internet, which broke the internet because it was terrible. I'll put a little overlay so people can see it. But it was just so, what's the word I'm looking for? It was so therapeutic, just doing it anyway and removing that emphasis on doing something that's
Yes.
amazing. So I think puzzles, I bought my best friend these paint by numbers. I don't know if you've ever seen them.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know how to paint, but she was, she lost her cousin, and doing that just really brought so much healing to her.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
I feel like when I went through I was going through a really rough time. And that was when I started painting, actually. And it was really freeing for me. And just like abstract, which is not my normal personality. It's very calculated, but something about not being able to control the paint was just really healing and good for me. So
I love that. Yeah.
We should talk about, I loved our conversation around, dating apps, but then also the ChatGPT and changing our vocabulary and all that. So
yes. So one thing I really want to talk to you about today is the use of ChatGPT and AI, but predominantly ChatGPT, because I think, again, it's so useful, right? Like the internet, it can be helpful, but it's how you use it. And also, I think, you wrote about that study recently, so I'd love to hear more from you. But one of the things that's really stuck with me is the way that our language is changing because of ChatGPT, because of AI.
Yes, this study, so a couple studies recently, and I'm so grateful that we are having this research done in real time to be able to understand how these tools are shaping our brains, because it's not all good, not all bad, but let's just learn about what it's doing so we can be mindful users of these tools, because they can be super helpful. And so one of the things I found most interesting from this study, so the study looked at ChatGPT users and people who use these large language models to help with writing. So they had students write essays in a couple different ways. They had them do it first, just no extra tools, just brain only, so the brain only group. They had another group that used just regular internet search engines, so this is like Google, so this is the search engine group. And then they had a third group that was able to use things like ChatGPT, large language models. They called them the LLM group.
Okay.
So the two big things that stood out to me, the first one is that those who used large language models or ChatGPT to help write their essay, they when asked to write a quote from the essay that they just wrote, 83% of them could not. Compare that to the brain-only group or the search engine group. Only 11%. So there was 18 people in each group. So that was 15 out of 18 people in the first group could not recall a quote from the essay they just wrote. Whereas in the other groups, only 2 out of the 18 couldn't recall a quote. So a significant difference.
Wow. And were the two, sorry to interrupt you, were the two from the search engine group?
Yeah, so 2 from the search engine and then also 2 in the in the
so 11
brain
each.
only.
Okay.
So yeah, so 11%
Interesting.
in those 2 groups, and then in the other group 83% could not recall. And so what's happening here is that using large language models is sort of bypassing this memory encoding process. When you skip out on actively generating information yourself or really more deeply processing the information, it can't be encoded in your memory. And so that, I mean, it just showed that so clearly.
Yeah.
The second thing, do you want to say?
No. Sorry, I'm just flabbergasted. I'm like shocked.
Yeah. The second thing that I found most interesting, so this study looked at a lot of different aspects, and so I'm just kind of picking out what I found most interesting. So the second thing was, in terms of they measured brain activity using EEG, electroencephalography. So we'll do the brain only group and search engine group first, and in those groups, they found like 79 significant connections in the alpha band. So just a lot of more connections across the brain. In the large language model group, only like 49 or in the 40s significant connections, so about half. Wow. So literally, you're getting double the amount of communication across the brain when you are generating these thoughts on your own compared to those that use the large language models to help write their essays. And so this makes a lot of sense, when you are actively engaging in something, having to generate your own ideas. Of course, you're going to be pulling from more places. There's more activity. Yeah. It seems intuitive. Yeah. But the biggest thing that they found was that they took those that were in the large language model group first, so using AI, and then they said, okay, so they wrote an essay using ChatGPT, and then now write an essay using just your brain. Don't use ChatGPT. And what they found was that the people in that group, they were much less creative. They had a narrower scope of ideas and topics that they wrote about. And this is what the authors of the paper called cognitive debt. Essentially that using ChatGPT or AI is preventing you from doing the harder, heavier lifting of thinking. So it's bypassing that, which gives you the short-term benefit of getting the thing done, but then you miss out on the longer term of encoding and learning that information. So they're calling this the cognitive debt. And they say that cognitive debt makes you more vulnerable to being biased, to misinformation, to being less creative, because you aren't filtering it through yourself. So given this idea of cognitive debt, I want to give people 3 things they can do, ways that you can use AI to avoid cognitive debt and instead build cognitive wealth, right? Okay. Because it is possible to still engage with these tools in a way that's healthy, that's beneficial, that helps you learn, but that doesn't have to deplete your cognitive resources or your ability. So the first one is do it yourself first, right? So when you have that urge to, you need to come up with something, or specifically for writing, so we'll stick to, because this study looked at writing an essay. I don't want to say that generalizes to everything else, we'll just stick to that. But when you need to write something, do it yourself first and then invite ChatGPT or, then incorporate it. For the second thing, I have an analogy. So it's kind of like riding a bicycle. If you think about riding a bike, you have to pedal and you have to steer. You can go further faster than if you were just walking on foot, but without you actively engaging, it's not going to be helpful. You're not going to end up where you want to be. So if you think of using AI in that sense, you can't be a passive passenger. You need to actively engage. And what that looks like is when you are engaging with AI, to still connect that information to your existing knowledge. So to think, how does this connect to something I already know? Be comparing, be contrasting, be active, right? Don't just take it and say, okay, and use that, right? It's not the copy paste method. It's the opposite of that. It's using, integrating your own knowledge. And then the third thing is to, when you're done using it, so you've used ChatGPT to write something, you've actively engaged in it, close it, and then either out loud or in writing, say what you learned. And so repeat it back, and then that's going to help to encode it into your memory. So this is helping engage new learning, which is really healthy for the brain.
I love that.
And that actually brings me to something that I think is really important here, because one thing that I took away from this and that I want people to understand is that you could not use AI or ChatGPT at all and still be at risk for cognitive debt. And what I mean by that is that everything you engage with in life, you can engage actively or you can engage passively. And so it's the same thing for reading a book or watching a movie or having a conversation. You can actively be thinking and integrating that with your existing knowledge, or you can just be passively letting it wash over you in one ear and out the other. And so those two different ways of engaging with the world, one is a really great way to engage your frontal lobe, your frontal networks, be, learning and sparking neuroplasticity and change. Another one is really stagnant and status quo, autopilot, and that's where you see decline. So I don't want people to think, oh, I don't really use AI or I don't use ChatGPT, so I'm fine. You still have to be an active participant in your life.
And I love that you said that, because I've got so many layers to add to this. But number one is that people can resonate with this when you read a page and you have to read it again because you haven't paid attention, right? And that's what we mean by this, is you have to actually pay attention to the words and try and think about them, and that's how you get absorbed into a book, because we can easily just kind of read and then not remember anything. And that's why I'm a little bit against speed reading, to be honest. But that's a different topic. But number two is that I talk about this all the time, and that is that you need attention for plasticity. Neuroplasticity thrives on the idea that we need to pay attention to what we want the brain to make plastic changes about, because as adults we have so many things in our environment all the time. It's not going to encode everything. We have to say, brain, this is important, we want to learn this, we want to remember it. And so you have to, exactly as I said, pay attention to it. Otherwise it just ends up, as you said, going through one ear and then out the other.
And the second part to add to that, so it's like starts with attention and intention of what you want to learn, and then it ends with reflection, or has to end with some type of pause or rest for the neuroplasticity to complete and the connections to form. And so what that looks like is, after you're done reading it, like I said, like I was mentioning with the AI, what did I just learn? Or what from this was important to me? What's a takeaway or a lesson? How do I apply this to my life? When you can come up with a tangible takeaway like that, it's going to stick much more, because we don't need to remember every single thing. And it actually wouldn't be helpful at some point if you remembered every single bit of every single book you've ever read. You just remember the parts that are salient that you need for the future, that are going to be helpful for you. So I think having both the attention piece and the reflection piece are things that we are robbed. Social media or technology can rob us of that when we're distracted, because we could be distracted to begin with and never encode it to start, or we learn it and pay attention, but then we move too quickly to the next thing, and then we miss out on really getting to lock it in.
And then there was something else I wanted to add to that, is that you were talking about how there are, was it 79 parts of the brain communicating with one another?
Yes, significant connections.
Yeah, so here's the thing. When I talk about journaling and kind of creating a narrative around how you're feeling, it's because when you're ruminating, and this is kind of going off on a slight tangent, but I think it should align and make sense. And that is that when you're ruminating, you're kind of active in this default mode type thinking, where the thoughts are seemingly incohesive, and we know they don't have a beginning and an end. We've seen this in the research. They looked at these kind of like thought worms, which kind of appear, but then they don't really go anywhere, and they just disappear, and there's no kind of tangent. It was a really interesting study. If you haven't read it, I'll send it to you because it was amazing. But basically, what that tells us is that thoughts are incohesive, they can spiral, they can kind of like, they don't have a particular story. And that's why rumination can keep you in a loop that feels like you're going around in circles. When we have to write something, especially, as we've just said, physically write it yourself, not through ChatGPT, because I know a lot of people are using ChatGPT to help synthesize thoughts and ideas and bad mental health and situationships, etc. But when you actually have to generate those words, you activate, well, now you've just told me that we have 79 sort of active connections. Is that right?
They activated more when writing on their own compared to without using AI. So
Right, exactly. And what that does as well is that it activates the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, responsible for generating words, because you have to actually think about words, and not just that, you have to link them up to emotional parts of the brain to create a creative story about what this thing you're feeling is, and then it brings you to a part where you're problem solving as well. You see, and so that is why journaling can be so good. Like, there's so many positive aspects to it, but scientifically, specifically neuroscientifically, we know that it activates the ventral medial prefrontal cortex and kind of it snaps you quite literally out of that default mode type thinking that feels like, everything's just like waves and crashes. I think when I do that, people can resonate with what I'm saying.
That's so good. And then you just triggered for me, as we mentioned earlier, the thought of generating words, and then how using ChatGPT is influencing our language and our vocabulary. And so this study recently came out showing that they could tell heavier ChatGPT users are using certain vocabulary words that are favored by chatbots. And then there's also words that are becoming less used because chatbots don't use them as often.
Wow.
And so I just say that for people to be aware that not just with ChatGPT, obviously, like we're saying, with everything you do, your brain is being influenced. And so you're constantly absorbing what's around you in the language you hear, and which is why it's so important, not just the people you talk to, but also your self-talk, right? It's like these things that your brain is just soaking up like a sponge. But I found that so interesting that there were one of the words that apparently is a hallmark of ChatGPT is delve. Delve, like we're gonna delve into this, yeah. So now I'm like,
delve.
It's so funny.
I feel like I say that, but now I feel like I don't want to say it anymore.
I was becoming so insecure about it because it was on my mind, and I was like, I don't think I ever used the word delve, but then I was like wanting to use it because I had been thinking about it because I had just read about that, which was just funny. But yeah, there's a few other words.
Well, the dash, the M dash is so
the
common.
M dash as well.
Which, you know, is interesting because I was reading a book, it's called Brief Lives. It was written in the 1920s. It's a Penguin classic. And they use the M dash in the writing, which obviously makes sense, but now it's got such a negative connotation because when I see an M dash, especially the double M, the double dash, I'm like, that's so obviously ChatGPT. And another thing that I've noticed is that the language is very kind of like what's the word?
Yeah, contrasting.
Contrasting. So contrasting. Oh my God, I said that with an American accent. Contrasting. Talking about influence, contrasting. And it's like, it's not like this, it's like this. It's not just your brain on low power mode, it's that you just can't cope anymore. And I'm like, oh my gosh, stop talking like that.
Yes. And I mean, compare and contrast can be very helpful to illustrate points, which is something I actually appreciate about ChatGPT. But now it's become this hallmark of like, now almost anytime I want to use the compare and contrast, I'm like, I came up with this myself.
Yeah, I swear I didn't use AI.
I know. So it's just wild to be aware of, you know, and not surprising, I should say, at how we're being influenced by just our language, and not only the language, but our grammar and how we're structuring things, how we're phrasing things, how we're communicating to each other and to ourselves. Yeah. So in some ways that can be really helpful to reframe how you're thinking about a situation. Yeah. But good to, I think the biggest thing here is just to maintain your own voice, maintain like, how would I say this? How would I think about this? Because, you know, if you think about these large language models, someone the other day was saying they've run out of things to be trained on. Like they've gone through all the internet material, and it's like they're looking for things to be trained on. It's like they've run out of original ideas. And I think one of the biggest gifts of each brain is the ability to come up with novel, unique ideas in new ways. And that in the same way that, like, you know, I recently went to a ceramics class with my sister when she was in town, and it was like we all were given the same lump of clay, and we were all given the same instructions for how to make this little bowl.
And you all came up with something
different. And every single bowl was different, right? And so it's like that's this beauty of this individuality that you don't want to lose through your language, your writing. It's so much, it's just so important to how we communicate, and also coming up with novel thoughts that are so important for the brain. And so I think one fear that I have around ChatGPT is just that, like, everything's just going to become so homogenous and the same. And it's like, we need to keep that individuality. So yes, use the tool to help yourself process through something, brainstorm, flesh out your own ideas, but make sure they stay your ideas. And it's helpful. I find it very helpful to clarify my ideas, because I'll be like, okay, no, that's not really what I meant. And then it helps me to refine my language or really better articulate what I'm thinking. But to do that back and forth process, don't just settle for what it gives you, to really engage. This is what I mean by that active engagement, because it's so important.
I love that. Oh my gosh, this has been such an amazing conversation. So thank you so much for joining me, and thanks so much for being here. Like, what a crazy privilege to have someone like you in my house. You're definitely the smartest person I've had yet, so don't tell me my best friend that. She does have a PhD, so
this has been so fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Where can people find you?
Oh, sure. On Instagram at Dr. Julie Fratantoni, or on Substack. My Substack is called Better Brain.
Amazing. Thank you so much. She's got loads of subscribers and incredible value, so please follow her. Thanks, guys. And again, just please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You'll be helping the channel grow, and I really appreciate you being here as always. Please drop your questions in the comment section, because I love hearing from you.